All right. Everybody hear me okay? Let's see if I get this to not feedback terribly. All right. Okay. Before we get started, any questions about the test? As Sophia was saying, give yourself a good amount of time for the test, like I've warned. It's long. It's a long test. So any questions on test, homework packet, anything?
Does it matter if we do the test before we turn in the homework packet?
No, not at all. Yeah.
Do you know whenever you're going to look over like the free response ones and grade that part of the test?
Wait, which part of this test we're taking right now?
That we took.
Yeah. I've got to finish up test 1 still for my last logic or critical thinking class. Then I've got to move to symbolic logic test 2, which I'm going to start this week. So it's probably going to be 2 weeks from now when I get to that. Yeah.
Cool.
Any other questions?
Oh, also, on that, like where they sign away to read over that and write the 1-page thing, do you want us to put that on the homework packet, or is that separate?
Yeah, put that with the homework packet number 2.
Okay.
Yeah. Anybody else? Questions, comments, verbal insults, abuses, anything? Okay. You sure? All right. Okay, so finishing up Hume's problem of induction, we're going to start looking at solutions today, but let's do a quick recap of basically everything we've already talked about. Okay, so Hume's problem of induction, let's just call it Hume's problem, is an attempt to undermine all forms of inductive reasoning. Okay, does anybody remember the types of inductive reasoning? The types of reasoning that relied on or used inductive reasoning? There are at least 3 types I talked about. There's more than those 3, but there's at least 3 I talked about.
Are you meaning like past, present, future?
Sure, yeah, exactly. So, yeah, different types of predictions, right? So we've got future predictions, or I should say, yeah, let's categorize it. I'll just say future predicts, where we go from, past data and we predict something in the future, right? Then we have historical predictions, or what I call historical reconstructions, which is a type of prediction into the past where we go from present data and we try to reconstruct or predict how the past was or what led up to this, right? And then we've got what I would call just general present explanatory reasoning or theoretical reasoning, right? Whatever you want to call it. Where we go from some, let's say, observable data, and we try to reconstruct or predict, put a box around observable. We go from observable data and we try to predict something that's unobservable, right? So again, the past data to the future is like physics, or the sun's risen every day, so the sun's going to rise tomorrow, right? Historical reconstructions, we move from present data, like we found a hieroglyph of a man bowing down to a cat, and we're trying to reconstruct the past from that present data. Present prediction or theoretical reasoning would use, observable data, like my car won't start, doesn't do anything when I turn the key, doesn't make any noise, to a bunch of explanations about what might be going on that you can't yet observe, right? And then, of course, you have like straightforward, just like inductive argumentation that we've already kind of looked at the beginning of the semester, right? You have things like you move from propositions, and on the basis of those propositions, you infer a conclusion, right? Now that arrow doesn't mean implies, it just means make probable or something like that, right? It's the inference arrow. So these, I would say that these are close to being an exhaustive list or taxonomy of the different kinds of human reasoning that use inductive reasoning, right? So these are all the ways you can have probabilistic reasoning. And Hume's problem, again, is not so much an attempt like he wants to undermine all these, but he's saying that all of these forms rely on inductive reasoning, but inductive inference or inductive reasoning is iffy, right? Why is it iffy?
Because there's no guarantee, I guess.
Yeah, right, because there's no guarantee. Well, but then you might say, isn't that just the nature of probability? How does that pose a problem? Yeah, there's no guarantee, it's just probable. So what exactly is problematic about there not being a guarantee, or problematic about these types of inductive inferences?
To say that something is probable, you have to justify it using induction, but the rules of induction are created using more induction.
Okay, yeah, so you are rightly seeing the next step, right? So the problem that Hume raises isn't so much a direct attack on inductive reasoning. He's just basically asking, what the hell is probability? What is probability? How can we know something, let's just say know something X, without certainty, or without proving it certainly? Right? What does it mean for evidence to make a conclusion probable? Well, we use it all the time. We should be able to explain it if it makes sense, since we're used to using it. So essentially the worry is that we should be able to explain how inductive reasoning, I'm just going to call that IR, how inductive reasoning works, because we use it all the time, but we can't. And so the analogy that he uses is kind of from ethics. You get into any culture, including ours, and you're going to have ethical norms or customs, right? You're going to have manners. You're going to ask someone, when they're teaching you manners, why should I act this way? Why should I adopt these norms? What makes these norms special or authoritative? Why do they actually matter? Well, if they can't give you a good reason, then it seems like it's just a custom, right? There is no actual good reason to have certain manners. Why do you put your fork on the left or your knife on the right, or whatever the order is, right? Why do you do that? Does it matter? Not really. There's no moral truth about forks go on the left, knives go on the right. It's just a custom. Now, when you're in the society, maybe to get along with everybody, maybe to function in the society, you put the fork on the left and the knife on the right. But it wouldn't change anything. The society wouldn't be any better or any worse if we changed it to knife on the left, fork on the right, or if we just allowed either. It's just a mere custom, right? So if we can't explain something that we would expect, if there was some good reason or justified reason behind it as a guide to truth or a guide to some sort of authority, and we use it all the time, we should expect to explain it. And if we can't do that, the worry is that it's mere custom. It's not a reliable guide to truth. Worry is that it's mere custom, not a reliable guide to truth. Make sense? This is what we've already covered. All right. Having a panic attack over sneezing. Damn.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Not good for me, so.
Yeah. Okay. Any questions on what we've already covered here? Hang on. Okay. So what were the two attempts that we looked at last time to try to solve this?
We tried to look at
Okay, so let's say these are potential solutions. The first one we tried, the second one was some sort of causal principle or causal regularity, right? All right. If we've got a causal principle or causal regularity, what was Hume's problem with positing that to explain, basically to fill in the gaps in inductive arguments? I'll put an inductive argument up real quick. Again, we looked at this one. Sun has risen daily. Conclusion. Sun will rise tomorrow. We tried to fill in this gap with a premise that basically turn it into a deductive argument, right? We basically say, well, here's the gap. We say something like the causal mechanism that runs the sun, that makes it go around and around, it will be the same yesterday as it was tomorrow. Every time the sun moves in a certain way, there's astronomical laws of cause and effect, it's going to have the same outcome. So we can predict, based off laws of astronomy and physics, and the fact that it's already moved around daily, when you combine those, it just comes out, the sun's going to rise tomorrow, is a prediction. Right? The problem with that is that all causal principles are just correlations. We don't actually know what causality is. They're just tight correlations. And so these end up relying just as much on induction, on inductive prediction, as everything else, right? These rely on inductive prediction just like anything else we could try. Remember that? Make sense? So that one just didn't work out. I mean, maybe it works, but it doesn't solve the problem. We still have to figure out the solution. Now, the first one. We also gave some, I can't remember what I called it, but the regularity principle. And the regularity principle would be something like, more of the same. If you read the Lipton chapter, he calls it the more of the same principle. The past and the future will always resemble each other. They'll have some sort of continuity, right? Okay, does anybody remember the problem with that one? It was that, yeah.
Is it the circularity?
Right, it's a circularity again, the same exact problem, right? So if I fill in the gaps, it says the past or the future will be like the past. Not only is that not true, right? We need a better principle, more nuanced one. So it's just, this one just isn't true. But any principle like this is still going to be predicting the future based on the past. So that's still just going to have the same problem of relying itself on inductive prediction. So both of these end up being circular. I'll spell it out just in case. Circular, right? They don't solve the problem. And that's where we left off last time, right? We couldn't find a solution. Does anybody have any ideas or thoughts that you want to discuss before I tell you what I think the solution probably is? Okay. No ideas. Nothing. No one's got anything. We did float as well some sort of psychological principle or instinct principle, right? That, well, this is just how we reason. It's just a human instinct. But again, the problem with that was that it kind of ended up reducing to two things. One, psychology and descriptions of how we reason aren't authoritative. We reason in bad ways all of the time, right? So just because it's a psychological instinct in human beings doesn't mean it's actually a reliable guide to truth. The second problem with it is that you can say, well, it's a psychological instinct, or this is a good way of reasoning because in the past, it has always worked out. This has always been reliable in the past. Well, what's that mean for the future? In the future, inductive reasoning will work out. So now you're arguing that induction in the future, or overall, is a reliable way of arguing or inferring from, man, that speaker's buzzing, it's annoying the shit out of me. that in the future, induction will be reliable because it's always worked out in the past. That itself is an inductive prediction, right? So all of these don't work, right? Past success or reliability doesn't work. Psychological instinct doesn't work. Causal principles don't work. Regularity principle doesn't work. We're just left with this seemingly, in all of our inductive arguments, there's this gap, and we don't know what to make of it. Any other takers for any other types of solutions?
I mean, last week we talked about like a religious standpoint, but it also has the same type of problem.
Okay, good. Yeah, so 5 would be something like regularity principles based on God, or theistic. Theistic just means pertaining to the existence of God. So theistic regularity principles, right? The problem is, again, just because God's always done this, kept the world regular in the past, how does that justify a prediction in the future? And then, even if you could find a way to justify it, because God is all-powerful, it doesn't seem like it's necessarily true that how God runs the world in the past will be how he runs it in the future, right? So this just was too problematic. It just didn't work. Maybe you could figure out a way to do this, but no one's done it so far. That's the point. Okay, let's just close out this little chapter on Hume. And then there's not a whole lot more to cover, but let's close out this chapter on Hume by talking pretty roughly about what I think and a lot of other people think is the right solution. And with that, after I talk about this right solution, if we've got nothing more to talk about, we can go pretty early and maybe we can work on our tests or study or get stuff done, whatever you want to do. The test is due October 5th, right?
It's before class Thursday.
Oh, it's today?
It's due before class Thursday.
Oh, it's Thursday, okay. So maybe we could do that. Man, we're running out of time, huh? And if it's a long test, that might not be good. I might need to push it back a day or two for everybody. I'm kind of worried about how that's going to go. Okay, here's what I think the solution is. I think that there are just facts about the world that we can know without experiencing them. So part of Hume's problem is that Hume's what's called an empiricist, which basically means that all knowledge, outside of maybe trivial mathematical knowledge, but all knowledge derives from experience. And this is in reaction to the rationalist view, where the rationalists, which most philosophers were before Hume, say that some knowledge is innate. That is, it's built into the human mind. It doesn't come from sense experience. Hume does think there's some types of non-empirical knowledge, but nothing like that could give us a principle of induction, right? It's just trivial stuff. Like he gives the example of, well, if you close your eyes and imagine blue, imagine like the darkest color of blue you can. Let's say, this isn't that dark, but imagine the blue on this chair. Now imagine the blue on this book. This is lighter, right? Close your eyes. Without experiencing it, you can fill in the gap. You can start to imagine a slightly darker color blue than this, but a slightly lighter than this chair. Well, you have knowledge of a different color of blue. That doesn't come from direct sense observation, right? But that does not work with complicated things like induction. You're never going to get an inductive principle like that. So in general, he thinks all knowledge derives from experience. Well, all knowledge derives from experience, and we can't find causality anywhere within experience, and we can't find truths about induction anywhere in experience, then if you're an empiricist, you just cannot find a way to fix this problem, because you've limited yourself to the observable world. Now the problem is rationalism has a lot of problems too. Like, what does it even mean to be born with innate knowledge? Right? That seems kind of naive. We don't just have beliefs in our head that we're born with, right? So a naive sort of rationalist response, I mean, this is a complicated topic, but I don't think a naive rationalism that says God or evolution or something about human psychology makes it so that everybody that's properly functioning, that's not mentally handicapped, has a certain belief in their head, a bit of knowledge that's true, especially about something like induction, right? I just think that's too naive. But there is another way to go about solving something like this. And it's a little bit rationalistic, but it's also a little bit empiricist. And it's called some sort of foundationalism. Foundationalism is the view that our knowledge has a foundational structure. So that down here, if you can see this, there's these sort of foundations or foundational beliefs that we don't know from evidence, we don't know they're true from argument, we just know they are true. Not necessarily because it's innate belief, but because they're self-evident, that once we encounter them, once we think about them, we have the capability to see they are true. It doesn't mean that we have ideas built into our heads. It means we have these capacities or these abilities to, when somebody says, let's say a logical truth like P and not P, the law of non-contradiction, like that can't happen, right? P can't be true and false at the same time. We don't have the law of non-contradiction in our head when we're born, but we do have the capability to recognize that it's true when we see it. Do you know this from an argument? No. Do you know this in any evidential way? Do you infer it at all? No. It's just something that you can intuitively recognize is true. Now, if we have these foundational beliefs, right, like the law, maybe it's the law of non-contradiction or LNC, right, that you can't have P and not P at the same time. Maybe we also have foundational beliefs in mathematics, and that's how we can do math without having, direct observation of mathematical objects. We also probably have logical foundational beliefs like if I have P then Q, and I have P, I can conclude Q, right? Do you know this from looking around the world? Where? Where do you find it in the world? So think about this. All cases of are valid. So you can see this in the world, right? Like examples of this argument form. Right, Sophia?
Yeah.
Like people make these arguments a lot, right? And you know when they make the argument of this format, all cats are mammals, it's a cat, so it's a mammal, you know that's good, right? But that's just one example. How do you know that all cases of this are true? You don't from experience. You only know a finite sample. But you have some sort of intuitive foundational grasp that this is good. And this is the type of deduction, right? Of a guaranteed reasoning. Well, okay, if sense experience and if just observing the world can't even prove deduction, right? If this is on some intuitive basis, foundational basis, just known, without evidence, without an explanation for why it works, what's stopping us from making principles of induction the same way? Right? Does that make sense? So where our foundational beliefs like the law of non-contradiction, like modus ponens, which this is modus ponens, it means affirming the antecedent, if I have P then Q, I have P, so then I have Q. Maybe we have a whole structure of foundational beliefs that are things we know not because of evidence, not because of argument, not because of inference, but because we just have some capability in us to know them. So let's just say that deductive valid deductive argument forms seem to be something that are foundational beliefs, and the law of non-contradiction. All right, if that's the case, then what's stopping us from putting, like, let's say, principles of induction here? Right? And from these foundations, when you pair the foundations with sensory experience, with experience of the physical observable world, you start being able to build a belief structure or a worldview. And you take your foundational beliefs and you start constructing out from them a system of beliefs, a system of knowledge, and it just grows and grows and grows, right? And they ultimately rely on a foundation. And maybe inside that foundation, you have the principles of induction there. Does that make sense, the general idea? Right? So again, the idea is that human reasoning must rely on some sort of foundation where it just stops. Like, we just know these things are true. How? Probably not because we have God-given innate knowledge, but some other way. And it's really complicated exactly what that other way is. I won't get into it. So that foundational belief structure, I think, gives us good reason, like some sort of solution to start understanding how we solve the problem of induction. Following me so far? Okay. Well, here's the other thing. Where am I going to put it? Hume just assumes, right? Hume doesn't attack deductive reasoning or reasoning with certainty, right? He just assumes it's good and then says that inductive reasoning is problematic because we can't explain how it works, right? All right, but again, somebody explain to me how that argument works. How do you know that that's a good way to argue? How do you know that this is good and that this is good, right? I have at least one of them. I don't have this one, so I'm left with this one. How do you know those are good and this is bad? Right? This is a bad way of arguing. All cats are mammals. It's a mammal, therefore it's a cat. Bad, right? Good. Or we could say D or S. D, therefore S. It's a cat or it's a dog. Well, no, that's a bad example. It's raining or it's pouring. It could be both, right? It's raining, therefore it's pouring. That doesn't follow. Right? How do we just know that these are good and these are bad? Can anybody explain that? Okay, so Hume's problem applies to everything. It doesn't just apply to probability, it applies to deductive reasoning too, right? Similarly, how do we know, like, where do we get the concept of a reason from? Right, so let's say I have a reason to do phi, right? I have some reason to do this thing. Look around the world, where do you find reasons, right? You don't. There's so many different things. Deductive logic, inductive logic, ethics, mathematics, that Hume's problem of just, well, if we can't explain it, maybe it's just custom. Hume's problem would generalize to all of these other fields, right? It would generalize to everything. So if not being able to come up with a theory of how induction works basically cripples induction, then not being able to come up with a theory or explain how deduction works should also cripple deduction, right? Make sense? Now, he doesn't think that deduction has that problem. So he's kind of being a hypocrite in a way. Or he's so used to, maybe we could say he is so used to arguing with deduction that for him it's become customary, just like he says induction is customary, And so he's just got this blind spot. But the reality is we've got the same problems either way, right? Questions?
I think you may already have said this, but so is Hume writing this satirically, or is he really putting forth this argument?
No, he's really serious. Not so much as like he wants to destroy induction. Like he's still, there's a private letter, I can't remember who he wrote it to, but in this letter, Hume says essentially that like, yeah, he believes in cause and effect and he uses inductive arguments, but he does not for the life of him understand why they're good ways of arguing. And no one can figure it out. So he thinks it is a problem to be solved, right? And he's skeptical, because he's an empiricist, he's skeptical that it can ever be solved. That's his worry. So yeah, he's serious. It's definitely not satirical. But the problem, again, is if you're serious about that, you also have to be serious about all the other problems that this raises, right? So, part of our reading at the end of the semester is I'll modify the reading schedule a little bit for the honors class, is going to be a section on the principles of probability and induction. How do you come up with a theory, and then how do you kind of increase the probability of that theory so you know it's true? And we're going to look at example after example in that reading after example of, well, let's say that you have, my wife's theory about me is that I'm irresponsible and forgetful. That's a theory that she has. And she makes a prediction from that theory that the next time she asks me to do the dishes, I'm going to forget to do them, right? Now, let's just say that she asks me and I do forget. Doesn't that increase the probability of her theory? Because she made a correct prediction, right? So a theory that predicts accurately and does it over and over again, that counts in favor of the theory, that raises its probability. Does that make sense? So in this reading, we're going to go through step by step a bunch of examples to illustrate those sorts of principles. Like, if a theory makes a correct prediction, that counts in favor of the theory and increases probability. Now, when I taught you how to do the symbolization, and I taught you how to do the truth tables and the truth conditions, and we looked at arguments, again, how did I teach you that this was a good way of reasoning? What was the first thing I did? Example. I gave you the cat example I've been giving all semester, right? And you can just see that it's right. And if I give you this argument, and I put it in the cat example again, you can just see that it's wrong. So we're learning deductive principles and inductive principles in the same way. I don't think any of us really doubt this, right? So if we don't doubt this stuff, maybe we shouldn't doubt the probability stuff. We just need to really clearly look at a gajillion examples and figure out what principles we're using, and then kind of just like rely on them, accept them on something like faith. Because we do the same thing for here, right? We do the same thing in ethics. We do the same thing in everything. There's always a foundational set of beliefs that we just somehow know are true, that we build the rest of our worldview or belief system on. I think that's the solution to this. I think that probability is on equal footing with deduction. They're just both something we know how to do. Make sense? Okay, questions? Now, if you read the Lipton article, Lipton will talk about Bayesian probability, which says that the probability of a hypothesis given some evidence is equal to the probability of the hypothesis it's the probability of the evidence given the hypothesis times the probability of, I can't remember off the top of my head, but anyway, yeah, times the probability of the hypothesis over the probability of the evidence? Times the probability of the evidence. Okay. And there's different ways to write out the Bayesian formula. But essentially what the Bayesian formula tries to do is it takes a model from statistics of how statistical probability works. It says, look, once we go through all of these examples of the principles of probability, just from common sense reasoning, and really get clear on what principles we're using, you add them all up together, and it fits really perfectly into the Bayesian formula. The Bayesian formula is just a combination of all the principles we'll look at the end of the semester. So, if that's right, if Bayesian probability, if that formula is correct, then you already have, basically now, you can use Bayesian formulas and Bayesian rules to now make an entire system of inductive logic. Just like we're learning deductive logic for most of this class, we could theoretically, and people have done this over the last 100 years, and they're still trying to universalize it, but if this works out, we will eventually have classes pretty soon of, you might take logic and critical thinking, and then you'll take symbolic logic, which is deductive, and then after that, or simultaneously, you'll take inductive logic, which will focus on this. And they'll be all on equal footing, and we'll have it all figured out, we'll all be super smart, right? But I think that is the best we could ever hope to do to questions like this that are so fundamental that it's literally asking, how do we know how we know? I don't think human beings are capable of really getting that much further than at least enumerating the principles that we rely on and just kind of accepting them on faith, right? On some sort of, we rely on these foundational beliefs until we have real reason to doubt them. Did Hume give us a reason to doubt induction? Think back. Did Hume did he give you any evidence that induction is unjustified? He's just asking questions, right? So he hasn't given us any actual reason to doubt the foundations. He's just asked a question about, how does this stuff work? So the idea here is that I think we should all be some sort of foundationalist about these sorts of things. We rely on these very intuitive principles and beliefs until we have reason that shows we're probably actually wrong, right? Maybe that reason will come along someday. Hume hasn't given it. I don't think anybody's given one. Has anybody ever given you a reason to think that the law of non-contradiction is not true? I don't think it'll happen, right? So even though these aren't certain infallible foundations, like a naive rationalist would want you to think, right? That they're God-given and we can know these with absolute certainty, a guarantee. They're still reliable in some sense. They're still worthy of being relied on. And if we can't do that, then we're just screwed anyway. So what's the point of doubting them? Okay, that's a solution that Lipton essentially gives. I just explained it without using the more complicated terminology he did. Right? So Lipton's book, if you're interested, the rest of that book is listing out all of the different principles I talked about for induction, and then explaining how you kind of sum them all up in one system. I won't make you read Lipton's book because I don't want you to have to buy it. I'll make you read a couple of papers and something I've written too. That's a little bit more simple. Okay, questions, comments, concerns on Hume? Any doubts, criticisms? What do we think? You're very squinty today.
My mind's just thinking.
Okay, your mind is just thinking. Is it your mind that's thinking or you?
But at some point I was trying to think of like induction like a puzzle. Like, we're never going to have the full puzzle, but based on everything around it, the pieces we do have, we can, almost practically know what the full image is.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah, so here's like one principle. I'll call it principle one. If a theory or a hypothesis H predicts E, and E happens, then that increases, let's just say plus increases probability of H. Doesn't guarantee it, it just maybe increases it a little bit, right? Let's call it premise 2. If H predicts E, and E doesn't happen, what's that say about H?
It should decrease the probability.
Decreases the probability. Doesn't necessarily disprove it, right? My wife says, you're irresponsible and forgetful, and then she asks me to do the dishes, and I do them. That doesn't disprove her theory, right? It just means, maybe I'm not so irresponsible, but it's not disproval, right? So then minus probability of H. And we can keep going like this until we fill out this big fat picture of all these different principles. I believe, if I'm correct, there are 9. Different books, different thinkers have, basically combine them or pick them apart in different ways. The last time I remember writing all of what I thought the principles were out, there's 9 of them. So it's a lot less than deductive logical principles. And so if we have a system of all 9 of these, and then we put it in symbolic notation like we're doing here, that gives us an overall view of what induction is, what inductive reasoning is, a model. Just like our deductive truth tables gives us a model of deductive reasoning. Now the question is, why should we adopt the model of deductive reasoning? Why is that a reliable guide to truth? Why is this a reliable guide to truth? Why is anything a reliable guide to truth? Can we know anything at all? Yeah, good luck answering anything like that. But at least we can get a system now, right? But moral of the story, science, history, philosophy, art, daily life relies on this stuff. What's the discipline that studies this stuff? Yeah, so you better start caring a little bit about philosophy. If you're not interested in studying this further, at the very least, you should not be like Richard Dawkins or Neil deGrasse Tyson or any of these other science popularizers who believe that science is the only way to knowledge, or that science is the end-all be-all. Because science has a problem with Hume, and philosophy is the only discipline that's going to help you solve it, right? Not to say philosophy is better than science. They're just equals. They study different things. Okay, that's it for Hume. We pretty much covered everything in Lipton, just in a little bit more plain language. What time is it? Who's got the time?
2:15.
All right. Does anybody have questions about tests, about homework, anything at all that you want to go over?
I don't know if this is possible, but if I type my paper on a Word document, can I just upload the homework packet and then the essay as a separate file?
I think it will only let you do one. I'm not sure.
It depends on your settings. You can upload to Canvas multiple files for an assignment. It just depends on the settings.
Yeah, I think I have it enabled that you could do it in two documents.
That was just kind of the way that I was.
If it doesn't work, then just Google PDF merger and just upload both documents and merge it into one. But yeah, it should work. Any more questions?
Is that just online? Sorry, the PDF merger, is that
Mhm.
just online?
Yeah, there's 500 different free ones online. Questions?
This is kind of a basic question, but
Yeah.
so philosophy is like an umbrella, pretty much spans any discipline. Anything's gonna have thinking, and so then logic is kind of a subset of philosophy. Is critical thinking as well, or is that just the name of the class?
Yeah, critical thinking is pretty much just the name of the class, yeah.
That's kind of what I thought.
It's critical thinking is a combination of theory of knowledge, logic, general philosophy of how you know things, but also what reasoning even is. It'll have some maybe stuff on there on argumentative tactics and rhetoric, right? Yeah, so it's not a separate field, at least it's normally conceived, yeah. But now getting a definition of philosophy is really hard, because if philosophy applies to every subject, then where's the dividing line? And the truth is it's just not, right? All these stupid departments, like chemistry is over there, physics is over there, biology is over there, philosophy is over there, and history is over there. It's all like within, oh God, my grandpa being alive, his lifetime. It's just money, right? It's literally just to allocate funding at a university level. But yeah, the disciplines aren't really like separate. All right. We're good to go, unless anybody has questions, comments. Let's just take a vote. Do you want me to extend the test due date a day or two?
Yes, please, sure.
Okay. Yeah, it sounds like that's a good vote. So it's Tuesday day. I will extend it to... I'll extend test number 2 to Sunday at 11:59 p.m.
Sunday at 11:59.
Mm-hmm.
The homework's still gonna be on Thursday.
Raise your hand if you're done with homework packet 2. Raise your hand if you can get it done by Thursday.
Probably can't.
Yeah, let's get that. Yeah, let's keep that due date for the homework packet to make sure we all do it. Okay, homework packet 2 due Thursday before class. Test number 2 due Sunday at 11:59 p.m. Sophia said it took her 2 hours to do it, so give yourself plenty of time. Yeah.
Do you want us to have 7.1 read by this Thursday or next Tuesday?
Let's do next Tuesday. Who would appreciate class on Thursday being just like study time and time to do the test? Do you want that, or do you want to come?
Is there any more like specifically to talk about with Lipton and Hume?
We can't. I mean, there's a lot of stuff we could talk about if you're interested in it and want to ask questions or just shoot the shit. But like, nothing in particular that I'd want to like lecture over formally. Yeah.
Because I think that's what the reading schedule is. It's just more like.
Yeah, it's one more day. What do you think? Raise your hand if you would rather not come to class Thursday and you'd rather do your test or study. Okay. Sophie, what's your hand up?
I
Yeah,
could go
okay.
either way.
Yeah.
How about this? I'll come here Thursday. You do not have to come here. And I'll just be here for like office hours to hang out and talk about things. So if you want to talk about things, you want to review anything, or you want to get a head start on 7.1, come to class Thursday. If you want to just do the test, maybe Thursday, start it during class time, or do some homework, then God bless you. Right? So no required class Thursday. Good? Okay, I will see you all, probably not Thursday, probably Tuesday. And we'll see who shows up on Thursday. All right, take it easy, everybody.